We're going to talk a lot today about how do we get talent, how to retain talent, but really our next speaker is going to talk about developing talent, right? And this energy renaissance is being driven by complex labor-intensive exploitation, tight oil reserves. Young people trained in science, technology, energy, and mathematics, STEM, are needed to advance this work and fill the void left by baby boomers, right? According to the Wells Fargo Securities, more than 10,000 baby boomers retire in the U.S. every single day. Waiting until students are in college is too late. The goal is to get them as informed as possible, so by the time they get into college, they know what they want to do. With that said, our next speaker, we're excited to kick off the next part of the day with a thought-provoking conversation with Ruthe Farmer. And just a little bit about Ruthe. I met her last week at AFPM, and she invited me to come to the women's luncheon, but they wouldn't let me come, so I twisted her arm a little bit, and we're able to get her down here today. So thank you, Ruthe. She's a national advocate for diversity in STEM and the founder and CEO of the Last Mile Education Fund. Ruthe has been working to grow the diversity of STEM fields across all sectors since 2001 and has a vast experience building and scaling national STEM initiatives from K-12 through the workforce. She has served as Senior Policy Advisor for Tech Inclusion in the White House, was Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at the National Center for Women and IT. So really, in just a few short conversation, as I mentioned when I met Ruthe, it made me start thinking about it, right? Again, this is our third one. We come in here and we hear about the problems and we hear about some of the solutions. Well, today, Ruthe, she has a broader view from our competitors for talent, and I'm excited about the outlook moving forward. Ruthe brings a refreshing perspective to the challenge, building a manufacturing workforce, and luckily she was able to make it here last minute today, as I said. With her, and I apologize, let me grab this, it was out of order. We also have, I'm sorry guys, Nita Garza, who will be moderating the fireside chat. Nita comes from Dallas. She's an operational excellence leader in TXO down in Freeport. Her organization is responsible for hiring and onboarding all distribution and process operators. The site learning strategy, workforce development, put $5 in the tray. No. Start over. For hiring all the onboarding and distribution and process operators, the site learning strategy, workforce development, and life-critical standard trainings for the Texas operations. Since joining Dow in 2007, Nita has held various roles in analytical, quality, manufacturing, supply chain, where she made a significant impact on organizational culture, employee development, and customer focus. Nita holds a BS in biochemistry from St. Mary's University, an MBA and MHA from the University of Houston Clear Lake. Nita is a strong community supporter and spends much of her time advocating and developing our future leaders. She holds a leadership position on the Brazosport ISD Education Foundation Executive Board in the Clute Intermediate Sports Committee, and the Brazoswood High School Senior Parent Booster. At Dow, she is the leadership sponsor for the Texas Operations Inclusion Council, a mentor for the Freeport Hispanic Latin Network, and a track lead for North America's Women Inclusion Network, and co-chair of the Texas Operations. So with that, please help me welcome Nita and Ruthe to the stage today.
Good morning. I have to give Paul some props. One, for making sure that we had chairs that women can sit in on this stage. Thank you for that. I cannot tell you how many conferences I've shown up to and they try to put me on some stool to teeter for the next 45 minutes while I'm trying to talk. So super appreciate that advocacy for gender equity on your part.
All right, well, I'm excited to get today started and talk a little bit about all the good work that you've been doing over the last 20 plus years, Ruthe. So you've been working to diversify and grow the STEM talent pipeline. So help us understand what's working, what's not working, just based on your experience.
Sure. First, I want to kind of understand who's in the room. So who's here from sort of an HR training kind of role? Raise your hand. Okay. Who's here from a executive leadership role? And how about community colleges? Okay, great. Good to know. All right. So, so I've been in this a long time. back in the day when we were like, is it STEM or is it METS or is it SMET? Never voted for SMET, very bad idea. And sort of like this whole push, which has been going on like really 30 years, to like STEM is the place we need to go. It's where the workforce is. You know, it's not like the United States is returning to a farming economy, right? Like we have an innovation economy, and that's manufacturing and that's technology. So there's been a ton of work for many, many years. Probably many of you are familiar with like robotics programs for kids in schools and so on. All of that I would kind of categorize as STEMspiration. And it's working, and we're seeing more and more kids coming in. But 80% of students in the bottom 2 income quartiles do not finish college within 6 years of starting. That is a huge failure rate, right? And so what is the point of pushing talent into systems that have not been optimized for them to succeed? And so the piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to unwind now is, how do we make sure that the students who have raised their hands to say, I want to do this cognitively demanding thing, whether it be engineering or technician work, and support them so they can actually do it and be successful at it. So I know lots of companies love to be like, I'm sending my engineers to speak to middle schoolers. Do you realize how many competing messages a middle schooler is going to receive before they make that decision for college after your engineer has gone to speak to them? Number one. Number two, is your engineer speaking to them actually helping? I once had the highest ranking woman at Intel speak to a group of girls, and after she left the room, and she had come up in the 80s, and she was like, you have to take up space like a man, you have to pound your hand on the table, you have to do these things to fit in. And after she left the room, the girls were like, well, can I still have like a boyfriend and stuff if I'm an engineer? Like, she'd actually dissuaded them from wanting to be engineers. So you have to really think about like, what are the right ways to show the message? And then this is recent research has come out about this. Families are the biggest influencer in the job a student chooses. That's why you see multi-generational people working in manufacturing and I once visited the Corvette factory, and there's literally mothers and daughters working on and building the same car on the line. Like those intergenerational things are happening. Children of STEM people become STEM people. But we are growing so fast as a country and as an economy that we just can't fill with that strategy any longer. One statistic that blows my mind, 4% of engineers in Silicon Valley are Hispanic. 58% of K-12 students in Silicon Valley are Hispanic. Their parents are not working in tech, but 58% of that talent pipeline. So your choice is either train the local kids into your organization, or you're just gonna have to keep importing talent from out of state and out of country. Like, looking at your demographics is really important. So one thing people don't realize, we tipped over to a majority non-white K-12 population in 2014, 10 years ago. Most students in the United States are black and brown. They are not white kids anymore. So if you don't have the talent pipelines and the family relationships, if you're not communicating with families, so there's great research out there about how engagement of families is going to be the biggest influencer in how. So if you're someone who's in a position to fund some kind of outreach program for kids in STEM, ask them, are you doing family engagement? Is that a component of your program? Because if it isn't, then you're just not getting as much done as you should. I could talk about this stuff all day, so please stop me if I... Okay, and then the final thing I want to, on this piece, please do not create new programs. Please don't. There is a literal fire hose of opportunities coming at educators, coming at young people, being like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And educators tell me, they're like, I can only promote so many things to the students. It's just too much. And so collaborate with the organizations that already have a footprint. If you take the Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Club, 4-H, and the Y, 30 million kids are in that network. Partner with the organizations that already have their attention, already have the trust of their families. Like if you're focused on getting those early messages in to the talent pipeline, those are the organizations that have the scale. And I see this all the time. People are like, I have this great idea for this inspirational thing, and I'm going to do it with 20 kids. I'm like, great. Where are we going to get to 20 million? Like 20 kids is not enough. Go where why are you building Radio Shack when we have Walmart? Like do the thing that makes sense, which what you would do in business is use the distribution channels that already exist. So I'll stop there.
You're speaking to my heart right now. I spend so much time in the schools, and you know, as a minority female coming up, this is a gap that we have, and so trying to be involved with them and be a good role model is really important. But also, I have 3 daughters, so a lot of your work, you know, there's so much competition right now for STEM talent and young people. This is a conversation I have a lot with my kids about, you know, what am I going to be when I grow up? And as a STEM kid, it's really hard for me to not be like, STEM is that's a good job. You know, you can go live on your own and not need money from me later. I like this idea. But how should we be thinking differently as companies about our competition for talent, right? And what competitive advantage are we not yet fully exploiting as an industry?
So I actually tell parents, I'm like, if you want to be in a really good nursing home, get your kid to be an engineer. Because like those things, they're like 10 grand a month. Yeah. Like it's really expensive. So just keep that in mind. So I think the most important thing is that the competition for your talent is not in this room. You are not competing for talent with anybody in this room. You are competing for talent with Amazon, Starbucks, Uber, Lyft, Target. Starbucks is paying $22 an hour to start. You get health care at 20 hours a week and free food every single day. No training required. You can walk into any Amazon warehouse, be an Amazon driver, no training required. And so those opportunities, if you're not competing with those opportunities on the pay piece, you're just not going to win. I mean, young people are, they're very afraid to go to college now. They're afraid to spend money on college. There's an intense fear of student loans and student debt. And many of you, I mean, there's lots and lots of free community college. Community college was already almost free. Like, it's very, very inexpensive. But free tuition does not put food on your table or gas in your car or pay your rent. The real issue is, can they afford to live, to spend the time to get the training to work for you? And so if they're sitting here going, I can get paid, you know, $16 an hour to train for this career that will pay me really well when I get trained, but I've got to get through those 2 years at $16 an hour, when over here I could have this flexible job driving for Uber, or I could be, you know, getting paid and getting food at Starbucks. So you have to like look at your competitors from a much broader viewpoint in terms of what are young people hearing and seeing, and what is the immediate reward versus the longer term reward. Many young people do not have enough of a safety net. This is the other data point. We tipped over to non-white in 2014. In 2016, we tipped over to 50% free and reduced lunch. More than half of our talent pipeline in the United States is in poverty, meaning they don't have credit, they don't have capital, they don't have a financial safety net. So even paid opportunities are not accessible to people who don't have any kind of, like 40% of Americans cannot survive a $400 unexpected expense. So like, just you need to be aware of the reality of the economic situation of the people you're trying to recruit and hire. So what is your competitive advantage? Your industry is super stable. Those jobs are going to be there for a long time. Lots of growth opportunity. You learn, you move up the ranks. You have retirement packages. You know, some of you still have pensions. I don't think I've seen a pension in a long time. I do have one with the Girl Scouts, shockingly. I have like an old school pension, which is super exciting. So you need to emphasize those things, right? But also just really think about, like, what is the pathway to go from zero, like entry level, no skills, to being in that stable, professional paying, like living wage job at your organization? And how can you support them on that journey, whether it's 1 to 3 years? Because that's the time you're gonna lose them. People drop out of education pathways almost exclusively. Number 1 reason, financial. Number 2 reason, family obligations. Your mom getting cancer is way easier to survive if you don't also have financial issues. And so that's why we have such a bad graduation rate and success rate for students from the bottom 2 income quartiles. So thinking about, as you as an industry are doing this, one thing is I loved his analogy of the network and the trees, because you as an industry coming together and collaborating on this, because whether someone's working for you or working for a competitor, they're still getting experience that you're gonna be able to poach them later. So focus on keeping them in the industry, not necessarily keeping them with you, because they're gonna go get that experience and then you're gonna go find them and hire them later. Also, don't burn any bridges, because it's a small place.
So I also am a Girl Scout leader, finishing up cookie season right now.
Yes, the cookies.
Only a couple boxes, thank goodness. But a lot of your focus has been on increasing diversity in STEM fields, and as we're talking about Girl Scouts, right? But particularly increasing females in STEM. So why does that matter? And what value does having this diversity bring? And I think, one of the questions I definitely have, more importantly, is what strategies have you seen be successful in attracting women into these heavily dominated male fields?
Thank you for that. So number 1, we cannot afford not to diversify STEM fields. So we are an innovation economy. We've talked about that. Women are 62% of the college population in the United States. But they're like 25% of the engineering population in colleges. So if you're gonna go shopping around going like, where can I find more people who are ready to get a degree in this field that I need? Well, it would be the 62% of college students. And the whole myth about girls and math, totally not true. 49% of students who pass the AP calculus test with a 3 or above are female. So there are plenty of young women with math skills and interest coming into the college pathway. They are going to medicine, they're going to psychology, they're going to biology. They're not coming down the, hard sciences, physics, engineering, et cetera, pathways. Lots of reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the environment. A lot of it has to do with sort of historical biases in the classrooms. There's a lot of work being done to sort of de-bias intro engineering courses. But one other factor that I just want to throw out there is it is very, very, very hard to finish an engineering degree in 4 years. You have to get into the right classes at the right time. Everything's sequential. A lot of students take 5 years to finish college, or at least an extra semester. If you were coming from a low-income background, chances are you went to a under-resourced high school. There are high schools in the United States that do not offer algebra. Only 40% of high schools in the United States offer computer science. So if this kid has come out of a high school that doesn't offer meaningful calculus and math preparation, when they get to college, they're gonna have to spend an entire semester on remedial math. They are now out of sequence, and they cannot finish a STEM degree in 4 years. They either have to take the risk of, I'm gonna try to take this course consecutively and put myself out of sequence, or I'm gonna try to take it concurrently and depress my GPA, which then means I can't get scholarships and other things. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about like who has talent. If somebody seems out of sequence or going a little slower, it's not because they're not smart, it's because the high school they went to did not adequately prepare them for the coursework that they need. But they're sticking it out, which is the more important and valuable thing. So we know that STEM underpins all innovation, and we need every brain at the table. That means we're missing out on so much potential innovation when we're not leveraging half of humanity. And I just laugh when we have these, like I was sitting next to the producer of TED, the TED conferences, and I was like, what are you doing to diversify the TED stage? And he's like, well, we have TED women. I'm like, do you have TED short people? Like, why is what women have to say only for women and what men have to say are for everybody, right? Like, why aren't you putting women on this stage who are astronauts and engineers and all the things in the same way that you put men on the stage? And he didn't have a very good answer for that. But, you know, women are more than half of humanity, 100% of the mothers of humanity. Not a niche market, controls 70% of consumer purchases. Like, we are not a minority group. Okay, I'm just gonna point that out. So if you want talent and brain power, more than half of it is sitting inside the, you know, the other gender. The other thing I want to talk about is there's so many examples where engineering has failed because they didn't have diverse teams. One quite famous is the Apple Watch. They only tested it in the lab where they were building it. All the engineers in the lab were either white or Asian. And guess what? It didn't work on anyone with dark skin or tattoos because it couldn't sense that it was on your wrist. That was not very long ago. That's a pretty epic fail considering Apple is such a smart company and these products are sold all over the world to people of all colors. Like, duh. They fixed it, of course. But when voicemail came out, they created voicemail, the early like PBX systems. It could not hear the octaves of the female voice and it would just hang up on women because they'd only ever tested it on the engineers in the room, and then they released the product and they're like, why is this PBX system keep hanging up on everyone? Like, just simple things. Like, diverse teams make better stuff because it brings more perspectives to the table. And one thing that I really want people to wake up to is that the United States is the only first world nation with a native diverse population at scale. Most everyone in India is Indian. Most everyone in China is Chinese. We have this incredible diversity all over our country right here. It is a global competitive advantage for innovation, and we are not exploiting it. We continue to persist on leveraging primarily men and primarily white and Asian men for virtually all of our work in technology and engineering, leaving behind about 75% of the population, women, people of color, people with disabilities. And if the company that figures that piece out, figures out how to leverage all the talent that's possible, is going to win this game 100% of the time. And I went to graduate school, got an MBA, learned all the words, all the paradigm and all the things. And I was just like, this is so obvious to me. Why is no one talking about this? And so a couple of years ago, I was down in, it's like 2017, I was down in Mississippi at this Silicon South Summit, and I meet this guy who, he was running the program, and I was like, what's your regular job when you're not trying to turn Mississippi into Austin, Texas? And he's like, oh, I'm the battalion commander of the 6th Battalion of the Army JROTC. I was like, oh, tell me about that. And he's like, we have 90,000 kids across the Deep South. You have 90,000 kids? And he's like, yeah, and they're 85% minority and 40% girls, and we have this whole program. And I was like, what? Like, there's a competitive advantage right there. There is an established network of young people we could talk to all day long through an existing infrastructure. And it turns out the junior ROTC has a 1 to 75 instructor to student ratio. The ratio of school counselor to student in the United States is 1 to 450. So our ability to talk to that group of young people. So I later wrote and passed federal law to push money into the JROTC for computer science education once I figured that out. But I was like, the South has this huge, huge diversity advantage that if they could just deploy that talent, think about what the Space Coast could be like. Think about all the Gulf Coast states and possibilities for engineering and innovation all along the South if we just were leveraging all the talent that sits at this table.
It's a lot to think about. I mean, just how many kids that maybe we're overlooking and the access that we maybe already have that we just weren't thinking about because we're trying to think of these innovative new ideas instead of just going to what we have. So,
well, I love the idea of like leveraging existing infrastructures to get to scale, right? So I was at the Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts is the world's largest women's organization of any kind. They have 70 million alumni. 70 million alumni in the United States. 85% of women who have been to space were Girl Scouts. 60% of women in the C-suite were Girl Scouts. 70% of women in Congress were Girl Scouts. They are the best leadership development program for women, hands down. They now have 78 badges in engineering and computer science and cybersecurity, which were established in 2019. What you as a company could do right now is call up your local Girl Scout council and say, we would like to help deliver those engineering badges. We want to host an engineering badge day at our company. We want to bring our engineers to do an engineering badge day with you. They're already doing it. They already know how to work with the kids. They already have the infrastructure. They have insurance, right? The last thing you want to do is take the risk of having a bunch of kids get hurt in your situation. Work with an organization that has 40 million, they spend $40 million a year on insurance as an organization. So like, work with somebody who already has all those things. And the same could be said for the Boy Scouts or any of these other organizations. Leverage the use the Amazon or the Walmart infrastructure rather than building something new.
So, you know, you've talked a lot about all the different initiatives that you've led across all the stages of the talent life cycle, especially K through 12 through the workforce, right? So what inspired you to found the Last Mile Foundation and the Last Mile Education Fund, and how is it disruptive to typical approaches to identifying STEM talent?
Thanks for that. So I have been doing this work for 20 years. And I have created lots and lots of programs at the middle school level, at the high school level, college level, and so on. And I had created a program back in 2007 called Aspirations in Computing. And the idea was there's lots of girls out there in the high school level that might be interested in technology careers, but they're being told that in many different ways that they don't belong. And so if we can just find them, right? So we created an award. The idea was like, any girl who's interested in technology, raise your hand, we're going to give you this award. And that group is now 35,000 young women across the nation. There's 93 locations right here in Houston. It's hosted by, I think, University of Houston hosts it here. And so I had these young women, and I had a front row seat to their lives because of Facebook and other social media. I'm like kind of watching them go through the talent pipeline. And there was this young woman from Mississippi who had barely made it through high school, but we'd found her as a high school senior. She didn't have very much family support. Both of her parents were involved with incarceration, but she taught herself to program in 5 languages, bought phones on eBay and rehabbed them and resold them to make money as a high schooler. And this is like quite some time ago, so like this is the early days. She was buying Blackberries and like rehabbing them. And so she clearly was interested, but had not had the stability in her life to get the grades that would get her a scholarship. So we found her, we got her connected with Mississippi State. She got herself a job doing outreach to other African-American students at Mississippi State. And I'm kind of watching her. And over the course of her college time, there were things like a conference. She's going to a conference. I would pick her up at the airport, drive her through Jack in the Box, take her to the hotel, check her in with my credit card. She didn't have a credit card. You cannot check into a hotel without a credit card. Like, there's all these little barriers, right? So it was her junior year. She was committed to an internship at one of the biggest banks in the world. And in April of her junior year, she posts on the Facebook group, and she's like, what happens if I cancel an internship I've committed to? And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I immediately messaged her. I'm like, do not cancel your internship in April. This is a very bad idea. And she's like, I had to drag it out of her, but finally she's like, I can't afford a bus ticket from Mississippi to North Carolina. She was going to get paid $37 an hour in this internship. And an internship your junior year, that is a job interview. They are gonna hire you. So she was gonna give up that opportunity and spend her summer at Chick-fil-A because she could not afford $200 of bus fare. And so I flew her with 10,000 air miles, thank you United, to that internship, found a place for her to stay, paid her summer rent. All told, it was maybe $2,000 of value. And today she's a vice president of information security at Bank of America. She is a mother, she is married, she has this beautiful baby boy, she's well into her career, and she is out of poverty forever because of maybe $2,000 of intervention. And so I realized I had been doing that sort of intervention with lots of students, using my social networks, using my own capital to solve these problems. And I'm like, there's got to be more kids who aren't lucky enough to just know somebody that is gonna help them. And so Ryan is her name, and her professor, Sarah, and I sat down at a conference in Nashville in 2019, and we're like, we have to scale this. And so we launched the Last Mile Education Fund in 2020. Today, I thought it was like a side hustle I was just gonna do, it was a little side thing. Today I have 15 staff, and we have funded more than 7,000 students. We're funding about 350 grants a month, and we're basically a nationwide safety net for any striving STEM student in the country. So if you're a low-income student in a STEM degree pathway that needs financial support to get you over the last mile, so we focus on juniors and seniors. So our primary population is students who are 6 to 18 months from graduation. And here's my proudest thing. Of our 7,000 students, 42% are Black, 20% are Hispanic, 54% are female, and they're 6 to 18 months from a degree in engineering. Like, they're ready to go to work. And here's the best part. The average cost per student is $1,100. It is stupidly low. It costs very little. And I was telling Nita the story earlier. We gave this young woman a $500 grant, and we give grants up to $10,000, but they range. And she said, thank you so much. I know it's a small amount of money to some people, but to me it was huge. I was able to pay off my credit card, so now she has access to credit. I was able to pay back my friend I borrowed money from, so now her relationships are intact. And then she's like, I was able to finally get a parking pass and go back to in-person classes. If she wasn't physically going to classes because of parking, she's not the person that faculty member is gonna recommend for an opportunity. She's seen as unengaged, but she was unengaged because she couldn't afford to park. And so one thing I'm very, very proud of is after launching this fund, so I think it was 2021, I met Fabio Arcano from Dow. We met through, I think, a conference or something. And he's like, I love what you're doing, but would you do it for manufacturing and skilled trades? So we have a nationwide fund with Dow called the Dow Last Mile Fund for Manufacturing and Skilled Trades. It's available to any student at the community colleges near the Dow communities across the US. It's several $100,000, thank you, Dow. And basically what we do is offer up to $5,000 of additional financial support to students who are trying to finish pathways into manufacturing and skilled trade jobs. One example of that is a woman named Kaylin who she had started down a path of a chemical engineering degree and then ended up having a child and getting married. So she left the pathway to college and ended up going to retail. And she had a pretty good career in retail management. And she's juggling, 3 kids and a retail job. But there's a limit to where you can go in retail in terms of income. And she still loved engineering. And so she went back to school for a associate's degree in manufacturing technology, and now she's finished thanks to a $4,000 investment from us and Dow, and she's working at Dow.
That's awesome. Well, I think we have to wrap it up now. I mean, I could sit here and talk about this
forever.
I'm
so sorry.
So thank you so much. I mean, honestly, what you do is so inspirational, and I think it really opens our eyes to what's important. And you're just really paving the way for industries to really get involved and support women in inclusion and diversity in our field. So thank you so much for all you do. I'm so honored to sit on the stage with you today.
Well, I'm happy to talk to people at lunch.
Yeah. We're gonna pause there. So real quick, they've got a few more minutes. Are there any questions from the group? Yes, ma'am.
So you were talking about the indigenous community, and in my space, I work in sustainability and the energy transition space, and there's this big bucket of $20 or $30 billion DOE cannot give away that has to. I'm sorry. There's $20 to $30 billion slotted for tribal communities that nobody can scratch. We can't touch it, right? But if you can improve indigenous communities, support indigenous communities, and invest in career pathways and industry pathways, and what has to happen is the indigenous community or tribe has to own a piece of the industry. But if you carve out a business model that says here's an education pathway and here's an industry and ownership pathway to grow this community in a meaningful way, there's $30 billion. You just have to ask for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things people don't realize is the big competitive advantage of diversity is that when you have diverse leadership in your organization, it opens up pathways to lots of federal dollars. So we actually have a fellowship for Indigenous women in technology where we basically buy them out of their last 2 years of college, and we're like, it is your job to get a degree, because the net number of Native American women that get a degree in engineering or computer science in the United States last year was 89. So if I can help 10 more, I'm like actually changing the national numbers. So we have 14 Indigenous young women in a fellowship pathway, and we are literally, we'll pay your rent, we'll pay for your car, whatever you need, you just finish this degree, because it is actually gonna move the national needle. And ultimately, putting engineers into those communities then unlocks all this opportunity and funding because there's huge advantages in federal contracting when you have, especially Indigenous, but specifically women and people of color on the leadership teams in your contracting bids.
Anyone else?
I think I saw somebody.
Anybody else raise a hand? Question? Yes, ma'am. Can we get a mic right?
My name is Latoya Freeman. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, and your story just touched me. I started off in pharmaceutical, and being a minority woman, I didn't have anyone to help me. Growing up in low income, growing up in a lot of crime, and I had a CFO in Irvine, California, invested $250 for me to fly there. I started off as a medical assistant, and the company closed. It was called Prue Bioscience. And when the company closed, the CFO was under investigation, and he called me Nugget. And I was so afraid as I was in Irvine, California by myself. And he was like, apply to the federal government, go back to school to get your associate's degree, I'm gonna help you in community college. I got my associate's and my bachelor's within my first 5 years. And I applied to the federal government, I got lucky, and I applied for HR. I was a staffing recruiter making $13.26 in 2018. And I was like, should I take this opportunity? And he was like, take it. I was afraid due to other women in other states making $20 an hour, $30 an hour, and I was only paid $13.26. I took that opportunity. I have been to every state in the United States in the last 7 years. Only state I haven't been to was Alaska. I've been to 70% of US islands, and I've been in HR ever since. That $250 took me a long way. So I just wanted to say I will invest in so many women in New Orleans and provide your information after hearing your story today. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's great. It really is true. I think one thought I just really want you to hear is that, so I wrote an article in TechCrunch a couple of years ago that was like, hey, tech companies, stop conflating privilege with potential. And we have 4 pillars at Last Mile. The first one is abundance. We take an abundance viewpoint to who qualifies and what qualifies. So we don't judge you, we don't even ask for GPA. I don't care if you have a GPA. If you've made it halfway through a degree in engineering, you need to graduate regardless of your GPA. Maybe your GPA is low because you're working 30 hours a week waitressing. Like, maybe you'd have better grades if you had financial stability, right? So we don't judge there. We also don't judge what they're gonna spend the money on. If what you need to be successful is clothes that make you feel good, going to school or dental work. We paid for a student to cremate their parent because they were going to have to drop out of school to earn the $700 to pay for that. No scholarship offers you money for family expenses like that. Scholarships are like, this has to be for tuition and books, and that's what you need, and we've made a judgment about what you need. So we're like, no. You need money? We just believe in you, and we just give it to you. We give it to them within 48 hours sometimes, because when you're in a crisis, you cannot wait months. We look at every student as an individual. So when you're hiring processes, there's always a filter. Did they do these things? Did they check these boxes? And then you filter people out. I want you to think about, how do I filter people in? Because someone who has struggled and persisted is going to make a way better employee than someone who has never hit a bump. So if your filter is who has the highest GPA and the most prestigious background, that is so much more related to the zip code they were born in and their parents' income than any other factor. And I'll leave you with one story. Carol Ann, she lives here in Houston. Carol Ann came to me. She was 3 credits from finishing University of Houston downtown. She had started at community college, worked her way through that, got herself to University of Houston, and she's working full-time in a tech support kind of job while she's getting her degree. And she gets to the end, and she's like, I just have these 3 credits, and I can't pay my rent, and I'm going to be evicted, and I was like, what do you need? She's like, $600 a month. So I gave her 4 months of rent. She graduated, and she went straight back to that tech support job. She didn't launch with a software engineering degree as a Latina. And I'm like, this is not okay, because she had never had the time to join all the clubs and the organizations and go to the conferences that would get her those experiences. She didn't have the social networks. Her family was first generation. So I connected her with a young one named Priscilla, who worked at JP Chase. She shopped her resume for about 7 months, and today she's a software engineer at JPMC. She's climbing the ranks. She's earning more money than anyone in her family has ever earned. And she is going to be an incredible employee, and they are going to be so lucky because they invested in her, she's invested in them. And she would never have shown up in most HR systems as having potential. And so I just want you to think about like an abundance viewpoint and how you filter people in, not out. Thank you.
Thank you all. Ruth, Nita, thank you very much. Appreciate it.